By the time you're old enough to understand patterns, it's already too late to stop hoping. There was a dress hanging on the back of my bedroom door. Blue, not navy, lighter than that, with small printed flowers that looked like someone had dotted them on by hand. The tag was still attached, and the plastic bag it came in was folded neatly beside my pillow like a quiet offering. I stared at it for a long time before touching it. It wasn't the kind of fabric we usually had. This one didn't itch. My mother didn't say anything when she left it. She just tapped on the door and set it there like she was returning borrowed laundry. I checked the receipt crumpled in the bottom of the bag, not on clearance. That part mattered. She hadn't bought it because it was cheap. She bought it because she'd thought of me. Or maybe she hadn't. Maybe someone said something at church, and this was her way of silencing that voice. Downstairs, the coffee pot made its tired hiss. I could hear my father setting down his cup, too hard on the counter like always. He had this way of making even breakfast sound like a warning. I stayed upstairs a few more minutes, tracing the flowers on the fabric with my finger. They didn't smear. I thought that might be the first good sign of the day. No one mentioned the date at breakfast, not the day before either. But when I passed my father in the hallway, he glanced up from his phone, looked at me like I'd walked in wearing someone else's face and said, "Big plans tomorrow." His tone was dry, just a flick of sound between gulps of lukewarm coffee. I said, "Not really." He smirked. "Well, don't look so worried. We've got something lined up. He didn't say for your birthday. He didn't say just us. But it was more than he'd offered in years." I folded that sentence like a receipt and put it in the same drawer as the dress, quiet, hopeful, unconfirmed. Hallie wasn't mocking me that week. That was the second sign. She didn't snatch food off my plate. She didn't roll her eyes when I walked in the room. She didn't call me Wednesday like she used to when I wore black. On Thursday, she even moved over on the couch when I sat down. Not to make space, not to offer warmth. Just less resistance. When I asked what time we were leaving the next day, my mother wiped her hands on a dish towel and said, 3. Be ready. Then she handed me a rubber band and added, "Brush your hair before you tie it back this time. Use that straightener if you must." She didn't meet my eye, but she also didn't scoff. I nodded. "Should I wear the dress?" She shrugged. "If you want. Up to you." It wasn't really up to me. It was an instruction disguised as permission. So I hung it up that night, steamed it with the iron, even polished my shoes with a washcloth. They weren't special shoes, but they'd look better if they didn't scream, "Hand me down." I cleaned them anyway. In the mirror, I looked like a version of myself I didn't know how to name. 13, with pressed clothes, smooth hair, and no reason to flinch. That version didn't last long, but she existed long enough to believe maybe this year would be different. At 2:55, the truck pulled into the driveway. It was clean. That struck me. My father usually didn't care if the truck was dusty or if fast food wrappers piled in the back, but today it was wiped down. The seats weren't covered in crumbs. Hallie was already sitting up front. Her lip gloss looked like it cost more than my shoes. She was humming something under her breath and didn't stop when I opened the door. My mother handed me a red sateen blindfold. "It's part of the surprise," she said. There was no smile, just those 4 words like a riddle with no answer. I hesitated. She added, "Just trust us for once." I'd heard that sentence before, always when something was about to go sideways, but this time she tied the blindfold gently, not tight, not rushed. I felt the knot behind my head centered, my seat. The first few minutes were filled with small sounds. My mother telling my father to slow down. Hallie giggling at nothing. My father saying, "She'll remember this all right." I wanted to ask where we were going, but the words didn't come. I told myself it was better not to know part of the surprise, after all. I tried to map the turns. Right then, left, a stoplight, then gravel, then no words, just the hum of tires over something unpaved. We stopped. The truck door opened. Out came the voice. Flat, unfamiliar. I obeyed. My shoes sank slightly soft ground, maybe grass. No one took my hand. There was no countdown. No surprise yelled in harmony. Just footsteps moving away. The door slammed. The engine turned. Then laughter, short, mean, distant. The tires spun. I stood alone. When I took off the blindfold, I had to blink twice. Not because of the light, but because I didn't believe what I was seeing. A barn. Not painted red or white, just sagging grey, leaning into itself. The grass reached my knees. A wheelbarrow lay overturned, rust spreading like mold. No balloons, no people, no cake. Just Hallie's voice echoing from the window. "Happy barn day, loser." Then silence again. Then nothing. I didn't run after them. I didn't scream. I looked down at the hem of my dress, now snagged on a weed. The fabric was still blue, still neat, still mine. That was the part I remember clearest, standing in that dress in the middle of nowhere, hearing my family drive away like they'd done something clever. They hadn't taken anything from me. Not really. They'd just shown me how little there was to lose. And for the first time I noticed how heavy silence could be when it wasn't yours. The moment you stop asking why, you start hearing everything more clearly. The blindfold wasn't tight. That's what I remember. It didn't pull or pinch. It just sat there gently stuck, like it was doing me the favor of not showing me the truth too early. The knot at the back of my head wasn't rushed. Someone had taken the time. That part matters. The air inside the truck shifted as soon as the tires left pavement. It wasn't the sound that changed. It was the way the weight of the vehicle hesitated, then leaned forward like even the engine didn't want to keep going. Hallie coughed once. Short, deliberate, then nothing. A seat creaked, but no one moved. Someone adjusted a mirror. The little click of plastic shifting over glass felt louder than it should have. Then came his voice. "She'll remember this." No one responded. Even the air stayed quiet. I didn't say a word. My hands were flat against my thighs, pressing lightly just enough to feel something that belonged to me. The truck rolled slower, each bump sharper now. Something small tapped against metal, maybe a bolt, maybe something loose under the seat. I counted how many times it hit. I lost track at 8. Not because I got distracted, because the truck stopped. The door opened. I heard shoes land in dirt, then flatly, out. No one offered a hand. No one guided me. Just the feel of the door's edge against my hip as I stepped down. The ground was uneven. Not gravel. Not grass. Something dry but soft. I stayed still. For a second I thought maybe it was part of the surprise. Maybe they'd take the blindfold off and clap or say something like, "Just kidding." But then I heard the engine rev again, and a door slam. And then, surprise, my mother's voice called like she was reading it off a cue card. "Happy barn day, loser." Hallie sharper laughing before she even finished the sentence. The truck pulled away. The tires spit dirt and stones behind them. 2 short honks, a rhythm like punctuation. then gone. The silence didn't echo. It just landed. I pulled off the blindfold slowly, like maybe the world behind it would still rearrange itself if I gave it a second. It didn't. The barn stood crooked like it had leaned too long and couldn't be bothered to straighten anymore. One of its doors hung half open, just enough to reveal dust. Something metal collapsed on itself, and a rope that looked like it hadn't held anything in decades. The grass was up to my knees. The sky was too open. I looked around. No trail, no banner, no tire tracks that meant return. I looked at my shoes. The polish I'd scrubbed in the night before was already dulled with dirt. They didn't hide. They didn't whisper. They didn't try to make it gentle. They left me. That word didn't land like a blow. It settled like dust on an old coat, quiet, patient, impossible to shake once it found the seams. I didn't check the barn. I didn't wait. I took off the shoes, held them by the straps, and started walking. The road was nothing but rough stones and sharp heat, the kind that climbs through your skin and settles in bone. I didn't stop. A mile in, I saw a rusted mailbox leaning left. The name had peeled off long ago. Behind it, fields, fences, one cow too far to matter. A snake of wind past my neck, the kind that doesn't cool, just reminds you you're smaller than the land around you. Eventually, I saw boots, one upright, one on its side. They sat by the door of a porch that looked like it had been both rebuilt and surrendered to depending on where you stood. The screen door creaked before I reached it. Running or lost? The voice came from a man with a beard like worn cotton and a hat that didn't fit his head. He didn't look concerned, just observant. I said a little of both. He nodded once. Sit, before you fall. I did. The chair was metal, hot enough to notice. He disappeared inside for a while and came back with a bottle of water and a flip phone that looked like it had been retired twice. I didn't ask for anything, but I called 911. The woman on the other end asked for my address. I gave it. There was a pause. Then she asked if I was safe. I didn't answer right away. The man, Earl, I think the mailbox said, stood a few feet away looking out at the fields like they were trying to remember something. He didn't glance at me. Didn't need to. When the sheriff's car pulled up, no lights, no rush, just dust behind the tires. Earl nodded once and said, "Looks like they're here." The deputy didn't ask many questions, didn't seem to know if he should. I slid into the back seat and held the water bottle like it might leak some truth I could use later. We didn't talk on the drive, not even when we passed the barn again. I looked at it. Still there. Still broken. Still trying to stand like it hadn't just been used as a punchline. The car stopped at the end of our driveway. I got out. Barefoot now. The straps of my shoes hung from my fingers like something I'd been dared to carry. Inside, the TV was on. A show with too much fake laughter. My father glanced at me once. Didn't pause. My mother was drying glasses. Hallie was on her phone, thumbs flying. No one said, "Where were you?" No one said, "We were kidding." After a moment, my mother glanced at the floor and said, "Well, you're back." She turned the faucet. My father muttered, "You took that too far. It was just a joke." Hallie didn't look up, but her screen lit up with a photo half-eaten cake, frosting cracked. Piped in pink icing, "Happy Freedom Day, Barn Girl." The caption underneath read, "Best prank ever. Lol." She turned the screen toward me. It got 67 likes in 10 minutes. Her smile wasn't wide, just sharp. I climbed the stairs without speaking, closed the door with both hands, not loud, not soft, just closed. My shoes stayed by the window, the water bottle on the nightstand. The dress still on me, creased in new places, dirt along the hem like a boundary. I stared at the ceiling until the wall clock stopped ticking in my head. No tears, no noise. Just one sentence that took root without asking. They thought I'd stay there. There's a difference between being ignored and being expected to disappear. The birthday cake photo made it to school before I did. The version someone printed had been taped to my locker with one of those neon sticky notes that just said, "Legend." Someone else had drawn cartoon flies around the frosting. I didn't take it down. I just opened the locker, folded the paper, and slid it into the bottom beneath my textbooks. By lunch, the hallway had settled on a name. Not Nancy. Not even my last name. Just Barn Baby. One kid mooed under his breath when I passed him. Another whispered, "Do you think she still smells like hay?" A teacher caught the second one and laughed. At least they're not throwing things. I started eating in the nurse's office, not because I needed help, but because she kept the lights dim and never asked questions. The couch had this frayed corner I picked at until the stuffing poked through. I liked how quiet it was, how nothing needed to be earned in there. It was a room with no audience. At home, Hallie left the screen on when she passed behind me, just long enough for me to see the post had been reshared. She didn't speak, but once when I walked past the kitchen, I caught her reflection in the glass door, smirking at something on her phone. Her thumbs moved fast, her eyes didn't look up. My mother cleared dishes like she was angry at them for existing. She should be grateful anyone's paying attention, she said to no one in particular. Later, when I reached for the remote, my father didn't look over. He just grunted. "You don't need TV." Try silence for a change, so I did. I stopped asking what was for dinner. I waited until the sink was running before I came down. I carried books to my room like they were groceries. I chewed with my mouth closed, my steps softer than carpet. One night, I left a glass on the counter and returned an hour later to find a sticky note on it. "You're not a guest. Clean up like you live here." That part caught me. Like, you live here. I began spending more time at the school library even when I didn't have homework. The back row had this half-broken chair near the military history section that no one ever chose. I took it. It creaked when I leaned, which meant I had to sit still. That helped. One of the books had a chapter on psychological operations. I didn't understand most of it, but there was a line that stuck. You don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your level of training. I copied it onto the inside of my notebook. The page already had lists, things I would need to know, things I had to unlearn, things I refused to carry. I used a pen instead of pencil, so the words would commit. That winter, I wore a grey hoodie every day. It didn't matter that it didn't fit right. It had a stain on the cuff from where I dropped a cherry icy the year before. I didn't care. The duller I looked, the less they noticed. I stopped raising my hand. I stopped walking in groups. I stopped asking to join. My English teacher once said, "You've been awfully quiet, Nancy." The class turned. I didn't respond. She smiled like it was charming. Some of us bloom later, I suppose. Someone in the back snorted. I turned the page in my book. At home, the bookshelf in the hallway collected dust. Most of the titles were fake, deep self-help guides, no unfinished devotionals with underlined phrases that meant nothing without action. I borrowed one without telling anyone. The first page had a quote about humility written in ballpoint on the inside cover. I ripped it out. One night, my father was on the phone. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was walking past. He said, "Nancy's still quiet." That's good. The less she talks, the better. There was a pause, then laughter, the kind that doesn't come from joy, just confirmation. I stopped next to the staircase. My hand was on the rail. In my pocket, my nails dug half crescents into my palm. I didn't react. I filed it. Like a detail on a map you might need later. That sentence didn't sting the way I expected. It clarified. He didn't want a daughter. He wanted silence that washed dishes and never interrupted the TV. He wanted a presence without weight, something quiet enough to forget. I stopped saying good morning. I stopped nodding when spoken to. I timed my showers between theirs so I wouldn't have to hear footsteps waiting. I made my bed like a stranger would. I left windows cracked just enough for the draft. The notebook under my mattress grew heavier. Exit plans. Possible jobs. What branches of military took you without a degree? Which ones trained you to read people better than they could read themselves? I read about body language, about how some people cross their arms not because they're angry, but because they're protecting something. I practiced holding eye contact for exactly 4 seconds, no more. Just long enough to register, not enough to challenge. When Hallie barged into my room and saw the notebook one evening, she laughed. "You're acting like someone's after you," she muttered, as if anyone's watching. She dropped it back onto the bed like it had burned her. "You're not that important." The door clicked behind her. That night, I wrote a single line across the top of a clean page. Quiet isn't surrender. It's rehearsal. I sat with that sentence longer than I should have, long enough to see what kind of shape it took in my chest. No one came in to say goodnight. No one knocked. There was nothing on the hallway walls but shadows from the overhead light and a smudge near the switch plate where hands had rested for years. The sound of my name didn't echo in that house. It didn't drift or catch or return. It disappeared as soon as it was spoken. So I stopped speaking it. Some things lose power when you repeat them. Other things get sharper. Some plans don't start with ambition. They start with not wanting to stay. I used to watch the front door just to remind myself it opened both ways. No one locked it. They didn't have to. It wasn't that kind of prison. You could leave any time as long as you didn't expect anyone to notice. At 4:30, the house made different sounds. Pipes shifted in the walls. The coffee maker hadn't clicked on yet. The clock on the microwave blinked in that soft, unwatched way it did after every power outage. I laced my shoes in silence and slipped through the back. The screen door pulled tight to avoid the squeak. The neighborhood was still asleep. No cars, no dogs, just concrete underfoot and breath in short measure. I never ran for distance. I ran until my legs itched, until my shoulders dropped, until my brain felt too occupied to replay anything from the night before. By the time I came back, the porch light had turned off. Hallie's window was still dark. I'd shower, dress, eat, standing up if I ate at all, and be gone before anyone could accuse me of needing something. On the corner of my desk, there was a notebook I didn't keep with the others. Black spiral. Soft cover. No stickers. The kind you don't write poetry in. I labeled the sections Exit Strategy Logistics Skills to Learn What Freedom Costs. Page 2 had a list of jobs that didn't require a family emergency contact. Page 4 had a quote I copied from a military manual I wasn't supposed to access online. Discipline is remembering what you want when no one else believes in it. I didn't need them to believe. I just needed them not to see it coming. Most nights I slept with one earbud in volume, low static reports from radio intercepts, training drills, case studies. Not for comfort. Just cadence. My mother knocked on my door once during sophomore year. Not to check in. Just long enough to say, "You've got that look like you're waiting for applause." She didn't wait for a reply. The door clicked. The hallway light stayed on a beat longer than usual. That spring the school hosted career talks. Booths lined the gym brochures in glossy piles, smiles too wide. I skipped the tables with dental techs and hotel managers. I stopped at the one with the smallest setup, 2 stools, 1 clipboard, and a man who didn't bother wearing a name tag. The folder in his hand was plain. No logo. Just a black binder clip. He watched me for a few seconds, then said, "You strike me as someone who watches the whole room before sitting down." I didn't answer. He handed me a form without asking anything else. At the bottom of the page under areas of interest, I circled psychological operations, not because I fully understood it, but because it was the only one that didn't involve holding a gun first. I met with him twice after that. His name was Gunnery Sergeant Ron Bishop. He never asked about my family. He once slid a manila envelope across the table with the phrase "cognitive targeting" printed at the top. He said, "You'll need a strong stomach." I nodded. He looked at my hands. "Better start learning how people break." I did. I read about fear-based obedience, how people follow lies that echo something they already suspect, how control is quieter when it comes dressed as protection. I wrote notes in shorthand. I practiced using fewer words. I measured my own tells, eye movements, jaw, tension, the time between question and blink. By 16, I could stand in the middle of a crowd and make myself smaller than a shadow. Hallie burst into my room without knocking the day before junior finals. She was looking for nail polish, found the notebook instead. She flipped through a few pages, scoffed, and dropped it back on the comforter. "You act like anyone even cares what you do." She didn't close the door behind her. I picked up the notebook, smoothed the pages, and placed it back in the drawer with the spare batteries and the copy of my birth certificate. I zipped the backpack. I didn't speak. One morning my father saw me folding laundry before school. I'd already ironed my shirts, paired the socks. He glanced over and muttered, "You planning on escaping or enlisting?" I didn't reply. He added, "Just don't come crawling back when you realize you're Avra." The shirt I held was light grey, faded under the arms, a hole near the hem I hadn't sewn. I folded it again and put it away. Silence wasn't passive. It was practice. I learned to track conversations without joining them. I studied patterns, what made Hallie flick her hair when she lied, how my mother stirred her tea twice before pretending to care. I memorized how long it took my father to shift in his chair when someone disagreed with him. 4 seconds. Always 4. At school, I stopped trying to erase my name from jokes. They ran out of interest when I stopped flinching. I wore the same shoes every day. The laces frayed at the tips. The soles had worn smooth. Senior year, the guidance counselor asked if I'd filled out my FAFSA. I told her no. She blinked twice. "What about family support?" I looked at the stapler on her desk. She said nothing more. When I turned 17, I visited the recruitment office alone. Bishop was there. He handed me a pen. I signed. The next morning, my father grunted at the breakfast table. "Let me guess. You think they'll make you special?" He tapped the rim of his coffee mug twice. "Don't embarrass yourself." My mother didn't look up. She wiped crumbs into her palm and stood. Just don't expect us to fix it when it falls apart. That night, I cleaned the kitchen without being asked. I scrubbed the stovetop with the rough side of the sponge until the metal lost its shine. I threw the sponge away. I didn't eat dinner. I packed protein bars into my bag instead. One for each day until departure. I wrote the date on the wrapper with a ballpoint pen. Not as a countdown. As a receipt. They hadn't paid attention when I stayed. They wouldn't notice when I left. Some exits don't need a slam. They just need the door to stay open long enough for you to remember your name before someone else rewrites it. No one noticed when I stopped waving back. I didn't leave a note, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because they wouldn't have read it. Or worse, they would have read it aloud at dinner, turned it into a punchline, and laughed with mouths full. The duffel bag had a broken zipper tooth near the top, so I pulled the flap of fabric over it, like I was tucking something in. Inside, 3 rolled shirts, 2 pairs of socks, a worn field guide, and the running shoes with the soft soles. I didn't pack photographs. I didn't own any. The bus station was exactly how I'd imagined it. Dull vending machines, plastic chairs bolted to the floor, and no one looking anyone in the eye. I didn't buy a ticket in advance, just walked up, pointed to a destination, and paid in cash. The clerk didn't smile. That helped. At 6:43 a.m., a message buzzed, one word: good luck. The name at the top said Mom, but the punctuation gave her away. She only ever texted like she was trying not to say too much. I didn't reply. An hour later, a post showed up from Hallie. It was a photo of my empty chair at the kitchen table, captioned, "Well, that happened." There were laughing emojis under it. I didn't click to see who reacted. The bus smelled like air freshener and rust. I took a seat near the back, leaned my head against the window, and watched the town recede like a drawing someone didn't finish. No dramatic last look, no music in my ears, just the low hum of leaving. When the wheels rolled across county lines, I checked the pocket of my jacket. Inside a small square of paper, the enlistment confirmation. Folded sharp. No creases out of place. At the bottom, black ink on grey print, Prescott Nancy E. I pressed my thumb over it, firm, but not long enough to smudge. Training didn't welcome anyone. It waited to see who broke first. The first night, a girl in the bunk beside mine whispered that her boyfriend didn't want her to leave. The next morning, she folded her blanket wrong and broke into tears before breakfast. I learned quickly silence was faster than sympathy. They started calling me Ghost Quiet, not as a joke, as inventory. I didn't answer unless spoken to, didn't react unless required. That didn't make me weak. It made me hard to hit. I ran better than most, lifted less than some, but no one could crack me open. Not the drills, not the shouting, not the heat that made others blink. I kept my notebook smaller this time, tucked it behind the lining of my bag. I wrote in pencil, erased often, rewrote shorter. Then came Staff Sergeant Claire Darnell. She wasn't loud. She didn't waste words. Her boots were cleaner than anyone's, and her file had red tabs. That meant something. During a break in week 3, she found me sitting under a low structure built from rope and steel. I wasn't hiding. Just out of frame. She dropped a canteen near my feet. "What's your real objective, Prescott?" I didn't look at her. "I don't want to disappear." I waited for a smirk. None came. "I want to learn how to be invisible without being erased." She sat beside me without asking. "You'll need more than silence for that." Then she stood. "Report to my team next cycle." The others noticed, but they didn't ask. On her team, I studied manipulation patterns, message calibration, controlled misinformation. Words became tools, weight, tone, frequency. I learned how to listen beyond sound, how silence could feel like weight on someone's chest, how to watch a group unravel from just one spoken doubt. During mess one evening, Claire motioned for me to sit across from her. "You've got restraint. That's rare." She tapped her spoon twice on the edge of her tray. "But don't mistake disappearing for control." I nodded. She leaned in. "Control means staying in the room and making others forget it was ever yours." That stayed with me longer than anything I read. They gave us a weekend pass before assignment. Most called home, took photos, bought snacks from the vending machines like kids released for recess. I sat on the bench behind the laundry shed, watching steam rise from the vents. The sky was cloudless. The sun didn't burn. It just hovered like it didn't owe anyone anything. A younger recruit sat down a few feet away. He looked over, opened his mouth, then seemed to change his mind. "Your family proud?" I took a sip from my thermos. "They don't know where I am." His eyes flicked down. "Oh." That was enough. Back in the barracks, I tightened the straps on my pack. My name tag looked newer than I felt. The stitching was uneven. That night, while the others traded contact info, I wrote a single sentence in my notebook I signed. But I won't send it. I didn't mean a letter. I meant the version of myself they wanted me to mail back. Neat, reformed, grateful. At lights out, I turned my dog tag over in my fingers. The metal was smooth, no scratches yet, no dents, just numbers and silence. Some people leave with noise. I left with form. And that's how they lose. They never hear you go. But they always feel the gap when you don't come back. The chair by the window was still crooked when I found it. One leg shorter than the others. I didn't fix it. I just slid a folded dish towel under the uneven leg and let it settle. Some things don't need to be leveled, only made bearable. No one met me when the discharge papers were signed. That was the point. I walked out carrying a canvas bag, a clipboard with instructions I didn't need, and a pin they said meant something. It stayed in my pocket. The air smelled like paper dust and old engine grease the day I drove past the town where my grandmother used to live. I hadn't planned to stop, but the name on the green road sign looked back at me like it had been waiting. Ashbridge Hollow. 2 words. No emotion. The house stood where I left it, or maybe where it left me. The siding curled like dried bark. The mailbox leaned slightly right. No key fit the door. I pressed my palm to the frame and felt a groan deep inside the wood. Nothing resisted. The door swung open with a shiver, not a creak. Inside cobwebs. One slipper, a mug with a faint ring at the bottom. The calendar on the fridge read, "A year I didn't want to count backward from." The title deed had been transferred without ceremony. An envelope arrived 3 weeks into my final assignment. No note, just my name on legal paper, a stamped seal and a line, "By last will and testament of Eleanor Louise Prescott." The electricity didn't work. The pipes moaned when I turned the faucet. I slept on the floor for 3 nights, using my old field jacket as a pillow. On the 4th day, I found the letter tucked in a tin towel under a loose floorboard in the bedroom closet. The ink had faded, but the indentation of her handwriting pressed through the paper like someone whispering through cloth. "If you don't protect Nancy, no one will." So I did the only thing I could. I left her, something they couldn't take. It wasn't dramatic. Not a plea, not a wound, just a sentence straight-backed and patient. The couch didn't survive. Mold. The bed frame had termites, but the mirror in the hallway remained tall, thin, with a chipped corner. I stood in front of it on the 7th morning, not to look, just to be seen by something that had been here longer than I had. I didn't start Crosslight with a plan, only with a decision no one would ever be mocked for being quiet. No one would be told they had to share to heal. Some people aren't missing pieces, they're carrying sharp ones. The first guest came through a referral, a woman with burn scars and steady eyes. She knocked twice, then didn't say a word for 2 days. I handed her tea and clean sheets. She nodded. That was enough. The second guest cried when I showed her the sign taped inside the pantry door. Nothing in this house is off limits, except cruelty. She touched the paper like it might dissolve. You wrote that for yourself first. I didn't answer. By the 5th visitor, someone had already told someone else, and they kept arriving. No pamphlets, no website, only a name whispered between checkouts at grocery stores and whispered through church pews. There were no rules about talking, only one about leaving knives in the sink. Blades don't stay sharp that way. I let them keep their stories. If they wanted to speak, I listened without recording. If they didn't, I passed salt and laundry detergent without comment. One woman asked if I had family nearby. Technically. She laughed into her sleeve. That's the only way I recognize family anymore. On a map. Not in my life. Another time, Hallie sent a card. No return address. A printed image of a bouquet. Inside. Hope you're doing well. I hear you're running a commune or something. Classic. I didn't throw it away. I taped it to the fridge beside a grocery list written in someone else's handwriting. One of the guests saw it, squinted, and muttered, "People always remember us when we build something they can't explain." There were no group sessions, but sometimes late at night someone would leave a notebook open on the counter. Just a sentence or two. One said, "He didn't hit me, just talked until I stopped speaking." Another, "I still flinch when someone says my name too sweetly." I didn't comment. I just left a fresh pen beside it each morning. Once the county health inspector dropped by unannounced. "This isn't an official facility." I nodded. No sign outside. I nodded again. "And you don't charge anything?" "No." He glanced around. "What exactly is this place?" I shrugged. "A house?" He stared a little longer than necessary. "Well, I can't cite you for existing." I offered him tea. He declined. One night the bulb in the hallway burned out. I stood on a chair, replacing it with one I found in the kitchen drawer. A woman I barely knew passed beneath me and looked up. "You don't act like someone who runs things." "I don't." She smiled. Then, "What do you do?" I screwed the bulb in, slowly. "I don't turn anyone off. Some mornings I find old leaves under the porch steps. No wind could have brought them there. They collect the way silence does, slowly and without asking. I sweep them into a pile and let them rest until the sun dries their edges. Some people think healing is loud, or visible, or measured in milestones. I don't. I measure it in how long someone can sit beside you without needing to explain why. That's how I know I live in a house now, not just a building. Because here no one asks if you've forgiven. They only ask if you've eaten. The handwriting was unmistakable. Even without the return address, even without the name inside, I would have known. Hallie curved her letters like she was trying too hard not to. The envelope was thick, cream-colored. No postmark, Just my name, scented written in pen that didn't smudge. Nancy Prescott. No title, no greeting, no warmth. Just a name like someone pressing a bruise to check if it still hurt. I didn't open it right away. It sat on the corner of the counter for nearly a day, weighed down by a ceramic spoon rest. I made tea, trimmed dead leaves off the spider plant, repaired the drawer handle in the hallway cabinet. The envelope waited. When I finally opened it, the paper crackled like skin left too long in the sun. 3 sheets, folded cleanly. No unnecessary words. Hallie had learned that at least. He had a stroke. He's paralyzed now. Left side mostly. Can't talk. The hospital listed you as next of kin. Legal guardian, technically. Something about a form he signed 20 years ago. I can't do this alone. A small photo clipped to the corner showed Wallace barely recognizable. Thinner. Mouth slack on one side. Eyes unfocused, but open. The kind of open that isn't looking at anything anymore. Below it, in smaller letters. I know you hate him, but this is bigger than that. I reread the sentence twice. It didn't grow any truer. The final line was inked heavier, like she pressed too hard out of habit, not care. Please just help this once. I didn't shred the letter. I placed it inside the small safe beneath the tea tins beside the envelope from Eleanor. 2 versions of handwriting. One asking me to save someone who never shielded me. One reminding me that I had already been saved. I brewed tea the way I always did. Earl Grey loose leaf, strained twice. The steam curled around my fingers like it was trying to remember something. I didn't mention the letter at dinner. Angela asked if we had any more white vinegar for cleaning the windows. Tamika laughed about burning the rice. I nodded. I passed salt. I offered a second spoon. The next morning another message arrived, this time by email. Hallie again. Fewer pleasantries. The place he's in is awful. They ignore him. He hasn't eaten in 2 days. If you don't move him, he's going to die in there. This isn't about us. I stared at the screen. The cursor blinked like a slow breath. Outside, a bird hit the window and left no mark, just a faint thud and the memory of wings. I opened the door, checked the ground. Nothing there. At Crosslight, someone had planted daisies without telling me. They grew in an uneven patch near the compost bin. I didn't ask who planted them. I just watered them with the rest. That evening, I cleaned out the drawer where old mail went to disappear. Receipts, expired coupons, a birthday card from someone who never followed up. I found a napkin with ink smeared into the fabric. You don't have to break to be done. It wasn't mine. But I kept it. Later that night, while folding sheets, one of the women asked if I believed in family reconciliation. I handed her a pillowcase. She didn't press, just wondering. Her voice barely broke the silence. Sometimes they only reach out when you're the last one left who still can say yes. I smoothed the sheet corners with the back of my hand. I don't think silence is the same as bitterness. She looked down. It still tastes like punishment. The power flickered once, then held. 2 days passed, no new messages. Then another email. His insurance only covers basic care. They won't move him without a court order unless his guardian approves it. He's asking for you. Or maybe he's saying your name. It's hard to tell. I didn't answer. Instead, I clipped the dead stems from the basil on the windowsill, swept the porch, mended the hem on a coat someone left in the common room. I printed the email and placed it in the safe. It slid in beside the others like it had always belonged there, words trying to bend time backward. At dinner, Tamika told a joke that no one understood. Everyone laughed anyway. I passed her the pepper. "Tell it again," I said. She beamed. In the hallway mirror, my face held less definition than it used to, not softer, just less interested in edges. Later that night, I refilled the sugar jar, folded dish towels, and stared at the closed safe. 3 knocks came at the door just before midnight. Not urgent, not hesitant, just hollow. Angela answered. "Wrong house," she called back softly. "Wrong name." I didn't move. The next morning the daisies had bloomed unevenly. One bent toward the compost, not the sun. I let it be. Some doors are meant to open just wide enough to say no. The sound of wheels on gravel doesn't echo the way footsteps do. It brushes past the threshold low and deliberate, like a decision that's already been made. I stood with the envelope already in my pocket, the one I'd printed last night, signed without ceremony. No stamps, no crest, just ink on paper and a signature that didn't shake. He looked smaller than I remembered, not just physically, though the chair swallowed him, but in the way a story gets shorter once you know how it ends. The kind of soul that doesn't fill a room anymore. Hallie followed close behind, lips glossed purse pressed against her hip like a shield. She didn't look around. She walked like someone checking off an errand that should have been handled by someone else. I didn't say anything. I opened the door. Inside, the air carried lavender and lemon oil. Not for performance, just habit. The women were already gathered, some with coffee, others with blankets folded across their laps. One traced the edge of her ceramic mug with a chipped thumbnail. Another adjusted the collar of her worn flannel 3 times before settling. I motioned to the empty chair at the far end of the circle. Hallie wheeled him there without comment. He didn't resist. His hands stayed curled near his stomach, thin fingers shaking without rhythm. No one asked who he was. That wasn't necessary. We didn't do introductions like that here. Above the doorway where he entered, a small wooden ark bore painted letters. Slightly crooked. Hand done. "You are not hard to love. You were just taught wrong." His eyes didn't lift. I stood in the center holding nothing. No clipboard, no folder, just my voice measured and low. This house isn't about closure. It's about oxygen. A cough from someone in the corner. A foot shifted on wood. The people who broke us don't need to explain themselves. They don't need to ask for forgiveness. What matters is they no longer own the version of us they tried to narrate. He blinked once. I turned toward him slowly. The way you approach something that once held power just to confirm that it doesn't anymore. You don't have to apologize, I said, tone even. I wouldn't believe it if you did. A chair creaked. No one else moved, but you don't get to shape the ending. You don't get to decide what parts survive. Hallie opened her mouth, shifted forward. I didn't turn. One glance, brief and still, was enough. She sat back. From my pocket, I drew the envelope. Pale blue. No logo. One sheet inside. I handed it to her directly. Her fingers hesitated, then closed around it. A quick glance, then the realization. Medical release. No further responsibility. You'll take him back to state care. Her eyes narrowed. You can afford better than that. I adjusted the sleeve of my cardigan. The fabric had a thread loose near the cuff. I didn't tuck it back in. The rooms here are for survivors, I said. She crossed her arms. He's dying. I looked at the circle. 15 women who had once thought they were dying too. He already left me for dead, I replied. This isn't where he ends. The group stayed quiet. No applause, no nods, just breath and presence. One of them Erin stood and walked over to the window. She opened it an inch, enough to let in sound, not weather. No one followed. Hallie rose, wheeled him back toward the door. The chair's wheels left faint tracks on the rug. I wouldn't vacuum them right away. He didn't look back. As the door clicked shut behind them, someone in the circle whispered, "Are you okay?" I folded my hands in front of me. There's nothing wrong with being quiet. Later, after the group dispersed, I refilled the sugar canister. The scoop clicked gently against the jar. In the kitchen drawer, the same matchbook I'd found in Eleanor's old desk still sat untouched. The front read, "Prescott's Auto 1 mile off 84. No one remembered the shop. No one ever asked if I still carried the name for them. At midnight, I moved the envelope she returned to the safe beside the others. The edges lined up neatly. Above the fireplace, the smallest frame in the room held a photo of no one. Just light through lace curtains, dust caught mid-air. Underneath a quote I never explained to visitors, "This place is not for endings. It's for what they tried to end." I locked the safe, boiled water, did not turn on the porch light. He left me in a barn. He will not die in the house I built from what survived. I used to think closure meant locking a door. Now I know it means not needing to. The gravel path hadn't always been there. It used to be nothing but stubborn weeds and broken glass from a window no one remembered breaking. I'd stepped around that glass for weeks before deciding to sweep it, not because I'd all had to, but because I didn't want it to stay. The sign still stands in the garden bed. Nothing buried here stays buried. The lettering has started to fade. That feels right. Not erased, weathered. We'd planted marigolds last week. I chose them because they don't care about poor soil or neglect. They grow where they're planted, but they don't beg to be kept. One of the women, I think her name is Carla, put a single shell in the soil next to hers. She never said why. I never asked. There's a dent in the step leading to the porch. I run my foot over it sometimes without realizing. It dips where someone's heel must have hit it, again and again. Maybe out of habit, maybe out of impatience. It's the kind of wear that only comes from being lived in, not cleaned, not preserved. Just used. I like that. The ceramic bowl I keep on the porch ledge has changed color from the sun. Once bright white, now the tone of wet sand. It's where I burn the papers. I never plan when I'll do it. When it feels right, I light the corner and let it go. The last document I burned was a copy of the medical liability form, the one I'd signed before transferring him out. The signature was clean, the date recent, but the ink didn't matter. It all turned the same color in flame. His name showed up in the obituaries 2 weeks later. No photo, no quote. Just a line of text among others, like he'd always been one of the many. Not the man whose voice could silence a room. Just a name now, and not even one anyone looked twice at. There was no funeral notice, no family line listed, just preceded in death by no one. The laptop sat open in front of me, cursor blinking like it was waiting for me to catch up. I am not better than them. I am just free. I didn't reread it. I didn't even save it at first, just stared at the sentence until the blinking felt louder than thought. Someone left a mug on the windowsill near the hallway, lipstick on the rim. Faint, uneven. I didn't know who it belonged to, and that felt fine. Some things don't need to be claimed to be real. The kitchen smelled like cardamom and something warm. I think someone was baking again, even though we don't schedule meals here. It just happens. A loaf shows up cut unevenly, already half gone before anyone says a word. No one leaves notes. No one takes credit. At night, I walk the garden barefoot. I never planned to do that, it just became a habit. The stones press into the arches of my feet in a way that reminds me I'm still here, still weight-bearing. Someone must have pulled the weeds again. I never catch them doing it. The shed is gone. Not just collapsed, cleared. We didn't rebuild. We let it breathe. That feels more honest than fixing it. I had a photo once buried somewhere deep in a drawer of what it used to look like. I don't go looking for it. I already remember more than I want to. There's a woman standing at the edge of the property now. I see her from the window sometimes. She hasn't come in yet, just watches from the fence line. Her clothes are clean but don't fit right, like they were given, not chosen. Today she stepped forward, just far enough to see her reflection in the window pane. Is this place really meant for someone like me? No anger in her voice. No hope either. Just that quiet, brittle tone people get when they've run out of ways to pretend they don't care. I didn't look at her long. I didn't need to, especially for someone like you. She stood there a while after that. Didn't say thank you. Didn't cry. Just stood like her shoes were deciding whether to root or run. I turned back to the porch. A folded dish towel sat beside the bowl. Someone had sewn a patch on it, like it had torn too early to throw away. I didn't pick it up. Later, I burned the rest of the papers. Not the kind people frame or file, just note dates, pieces of old silence that still had corners sharp enough to cut. Ash blew sideways in the wind. Some of it landed on the marigolds. They didn't notice. The woman was still there when the porch light came on. I didn't call out. I opened the door. Not for closure. For air. Some mornings I don't need coffee. Just the sound of water settling into a boil and the weight of ceramic in my hand. The kettle clicks before it hisses. I never rush it. The mug I use has a faint chip near the lip, the kind you learn to sip around without thinking. I've had it since before Crosslight had walls without stains. The gravel is cooler now. Spring isn't what the calendar says, it's what your souls decide. I walk the garden path, slowly letting the cold press in. Not painful, just honest. It doesn't cut like the stones from the bus station when I was 13. These feel shaped by use, not punishment. The bench that sits where the shed used to be is made from the beams we salvaged. Someone carved into the back slat with a wood burner. No one left alone again. The groove is uneven, but the letters hold. She came in 3 nights ago. Late. Jacket zipped all the way up despite the warmth. She kept her shoes on, even inside. That's allowed here. Some people need to feel the door is still an option. At breakfast, she stood in front of the sign in the garden for a long time. Just stood. Shoulders hunched like she didn't trust air not to betray her. We don't go back to the people who buried us alive. We plant gardens over the place they left us for dead. Her hands were still. That's what I noticed. Not the faded marks, not the loose stitching at her cuff. Just the stillness. As if stillness was the new fight. I didn't say anything. I brought her a cup of tea, set it down on the brick wall near her knee. She didn't look up, but she didn't flinch either. That's its own kind of welcome. Inside the others were journaling. The dining room smelled like rosemary and pencil shavings. Someone always forgets to cap their pen, so there's usually a stain on the tablecloth. That's fine. It reminds me things are used, not stored. There's a corkboard near the kitchen window now. Notes go up without names. One had been tacked in yesterday, the edges folded where someone must have clenched it for a while before deciding. I saw your garden in the news. I thought I was too late. Maybe I'm not. I don't know who pinned it. Doesn't matter. I left it there. Tasha bakes when her hands won't sit still. Jenna organizes the library shelf, even though no one uses the system she swears she designed. I sweep. Not because the floor needs it, but because I like the pattern the bristles make. I opened my laptop that afternoon. It had dust near the hinge. I hadn't written anything real in months, not since the obituary without a picture. There's no title on the draft, just a blinking cursor and a line near the bottom that reads, "The girl in the blue dress doesn't live here anymore. She made room for someone stronger." I didn't add anything else. I didn't backspace either. At dusk, the porch lights come on, not because anyone sets them, just because they're wired that way. Low bulbs warm, glow, not bright enough to chase anything, just enough to say you're not in the dark, alone. The clothesline behind the house had 3 towels hanging, all different colors. One still had a tag. The wind moved them in uneven patterns like they didn't agree on the rhythm. No one came to take them down. They dried themselves. The community here doesn't vote. We just sense. If a new room needs to be painted, someone starts and others follow. That's how the North Wing came to be. No meeting. Just one brushstroke at a time. People say I'm in charge. I'm not. I just breathe deeper now, and sometimes others match the breath. The girl from the garden has started sleeping without a nightlight. No one mentioned it, but we noticed. There's an old flannel shirt I keep near the front door. Torn pocket sleeves too long. It belonged to no one in particular, but women wrap it around themselves when they step out for air. It's not washed often. I think the weight matters more than the scent. Tonight, the kitchen was quiet. Only one mug in the sink. Someone had lit a candle on the stove ledge. Unscented, half-burnt flame barely upright. Still, it burned. I looked into the mirror on the way back to my room. Not to adjust anything, just to look. There's no revelation in the glass. No transformation. Just a face no longer waiting to be recognized. I turned off the kitchen light without ceremony. Outside, the hanging lanterns flickered, like lungs, slow, soft, unsure of who was watching. I didn't pray. I didn't wish. I stood barefoot, one hand resting on the wall I'd patched last spring. The plaster held, and I said nothing, not out of fear, but because there was nothing left to prove.